Are you struggling with all the information there is to know to become a helicopter pilot? Discover the #1 helicopter training system on the web. Now you can attend helicopter online ground school from the comfort of your own home, at your own pace, 24 hours a day. Experienced, certified, and passionate. Let Captain Keller guide your online instruction to help you succeed in obtaining your helicopter pilot's license. Only at Helicopter Online Ground School.
Video number 6. So I'm going to walk over here, check, see if we got any more questions. See anybody popped up since I walked away? Sorry about this repeat question. After you get your commercial, is there a restriction on what weight helicopter you can fly? Or are there certain training hours you have to do for heavier or larger aircraft? That's a great question. Seat weight goes by manufacturer. So the different helicopters have different seat weights. The smaller helicopters, of course, are going to have a lighter max seat weight. A larger helicopter can accommodate a heavier seat weight. There are a lot of people that know going into the training that they have to lose a certain amount of pounds to get the job that they want. And that's not to be disrespectful to anybody. That's just, it is what it is. The manufacturers have seat weights, so it depends on any specific manufacturer of the aircraft, and then the company can have a max seat weight for a pilot. Sometimes the max seat weight for a pilot's less than what the manufacturer allows because, like, for example, in an EMS environment, they have so much equipment on board, they got to allow so much for a patient, so much for a nurse, so much for a medic. So weight is specific to jobs in aircraft. There's certain training hours you have to do for heavier or larger aircraft. Not until you get to 12,500 pounds or above, which not many people fly those. Most helicopters are below that. There's nothing for a twin-engine helicopter. There's no additional rating for that. So in general, a helicopter is a helicopter until you get to 12,500 pounds. Now there are specific regulations for our 22 specifically and for our 44 that don't apply to an Enstrom or a Schweitzer. So kind of gets complicated there again too. Depends on the aircraft, depends on the situation. What's your opinion on training both rotor and fixed? Haven't started any training yet. I think hands down, if you want to be a helicopter pilot, you need to do all helicopter. Because when you go to get that first job, all they care about is how much helicopter time do you have. Nothing wrong with airplanes. You can do airplanes first and then switch to helicopters. But if you want to be a professional helicopter pilot, I would get in helicopters and stay with those. Do airplanes later. That's what I did. I added my airplane later after I was a helicopter CFI. So it depends on any one individual what you want to do. What's in your gut. Do you want helicopter or do you want airplane? Are you going to do it for fun? Do you want to do it as a profession? So there's those other things to weigh in there that will help you decide, you know, which one is right for you. You can do both. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do one and then add the other, but I wouldn't confuse the two. I've had people go, well, I'm taking airplane lessons right now too. I don't think that's a good idea. Focus on one, get that license, then focus on the other. I think that's just smart because there are certain inherent things that are different between the two aircraft that if you do some airplane things that are instinct in a helicopter could kill you. So not a lot, but there's a few things that are different. Although there are many things that are similar, there are a couple things that you can do in an airplane that you cannot do in a helicopter. So that's, I think, for your own kind of for your own personal benefit there. I would pick the one you want. Airplane is cheaper, so if you wanted to get flying and money's kind of a problem, airplanes you could definitely get started quicker. All right, looks like I'm caught up there. So I'm going to go next to Chapter 6, Helicopter Check Ride Student Failures. I've been doing check rides since 2001, and I have hundreds of check rides successful. I've only had 3 fail, and those were all prior to 10 years ago, more when I was a new instructor. The first one was my very first student, 2001. And the other 2 were within that first 5 years. I haven't had any over 10. So I put those in the book because out of all the check rides we've done and all the preparation, all the work I've done with people, for those 3 people to have a failure, in my mind, it's like, these are pretty important because it's the only time I've seen somebody fail. So I talk about those things so you can see specific firsthand the kind of things that could trip people up. So, thank you for the question, Richie. So I am going to roll that now. the 3 times that I have had students that had failures. We'll roll that video and we'll be back just shortly. And today I want to share with you the 3 check ride failures of students that I've had over the past 13 years. Number 3 coming up again. Out of all the hundreds of people I've sent for check rides, I've only had 3 people fail on the first attempt. So I thought, out of all those check rides, these are 3 good probably tips to cover for some quick check ride prep on what I've seen, this trip people up over a number of years. Number 1 was my very first student that I ever sent for a check ride anywhere, and it was in a Robinson helicopter. And these 3 failures, one's a Robinson, one's a Schweitzer, and one is an Enstrom. So again, number 3, the 3 failures have all been in 3 different styles of aircraft. So this first gentleman was an airplane CFI, and he was a really sharp individual, and he was really well prepared, and he got to the check ride, and he was busting through the oral stuff, and he was doing great. And then the examiner asked him to figure how to figure pressure altitude. And he couldn't remember how to do it by hand. He wanted to use a chart or use his fancy electronic E6B. And the examiner said, no, you have to be able to figure pressure altitude by hand. For example, you're in an aircraft, you're in a helicopter, and you're going to divert and go land at an airport where you hadn't planned it landing, and maybe it's a higher elevation, and you need to know how to hover when you get there. So you need to be able to take the current pressure setting for that airport, figure pressure altitude by hand in order to work the performance chart. And he could not do it by hand, so the examiner failed him. So that's one that I've always made sure over the years, 100% hands down, make sure my students know how to figure pressure altitude by hand. Number 2 was a student of mine back in Cleveland when I was a fairly new instructor, a few years under my belt, and it was in a Schweitzer helicopter. And this one was on a steep approach. And this was a female student that was going for a CFI check ride. And she was excellent on the ground. She was a great ground instructor and was doing really well with all the ground stuff. And the fly-in was, could have been a little bit better, but it wasn't too bad. And on the flight portion of the check ride, she of course aces the oral part. They go out to fly. 15 minutes later, I see them flying back in or hovering back in. I thought, uh-oh. I know this can't be good. So when they get in, basically we all sit down together and he says, okay, on your steep approach, you started it and you told me it was too steep. And then as she continued the approach, she kept saying, oh, this is too steep, this is too steep. But she continued the approach all the way down. And when she got to the end, he said, well, what do you think? And she said, well, that was too steep. And he said, that's right. And you had the opportunity to go around because it was too steep at the beginning. So at the beginning of the approach, when she first started it and said, this is too steep, she had the option to go around. She could have went around, took her time, got set up again. There she'd have had the go around done, because that's a maneuver for the check ride. Went around, take a big deep breath, set it up again, and try it again. But she started too steep, told the examiner it was too steep, and then continued the approach. So we all know sailing with power is a big deal, and that's why the steep approach is a big deal, and you got to use good technique. And if you think it's too steep, go around, and you have to catch it early. You can't wait till you're 3/4 of the way through the approach and then say, oh, I'm going to go around now. That's not the point. If you start out a little bit sloppy and you think it's a little bit too steep at the beginning of the approach, when you're up several hundred feet, you could ultimately go around and save yourself busting the check ride. So remember, a steep approach is 15 degrees. If you're coming in and you're getting real steep and you're getting real slow, happen to have the wind off your tail or off the side, you're really in danger of sailing with power. So 15 degrees for a steep approach. There's guys going out and flying them, trying to fly them at 45 degrees, and that's just very, very difficult. So steep approach, 15 degrees. And then the third one was in an Enstrom, and it was during an auto rotation. And in this instance, this gentleman entered his auto rotation a little too early or a little too late. I can't remember which one it was, but he missed the spot. The check ride was going pretty good, but he missed the spot by like 60 or 70 feet. So, like an example for this picture, if this is your spot right here, here's an arrow, your auto rotation, you want to come out and you want to flare pretty much over your spot. If you missed it by 10 or 20 feet, is that a big deal? Probably not. You're probably going to be okay. But if you go and miss it by 50 or 70 or 100 feet, not going to be acceptable. So in that one, like the others, we had to do a little additional ground and go out and do a few maneuvers, and then all three of these people came back and aced their check rides the second time after their first failure. So on the auto rotation, you got to get good at estimating at when to enter, so that depending on whether is it a windy day, is it a calm day, you got to come out pretty close to your attended spot. If you're shooting your auto to the numbers 2.8, you want to be starting your flare before 2.8 and leveling out right at the numbers, or pretty darn close. A little bit of run on speed's okay, but you want to flare and level out over your intended touchdown spot. So if you have any comments or questions, put them in the box below. If you're interested in help with preparing for your helicopter check ride, you can always go to helicopterground.com. We have a wealth of information there about our online ground school. We're now 2 years online, and we are having more and more check ride success all the time, and it's really turned out to be a neat deal.